Yes, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient radio, broadcasting live from the worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Find us on the web at coalitionradio.us, on Facebook at facebook.com, the Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at coalition_radio. We broadcast, we stream, we podcast, we blog, we entertain. On that note, please stop what you're doing. Go to coalition.radio.us. Please go, and there is a musical testament, a veritable biblical etude to our spiritual leader, Paulie Walnuts, otherwise known in private circles as Nick Mattiello, the Speaker of the House of the state of Rhode Island, Mr. Andrew Stewart, I believe, correct, David?
Andrew Stewart, yes.
Andrew Stewart.
Thank you, Andrew.
Andrew, we cannot say enough. I actually was moved to tears. I actually broke down and got emotional when I saw it, because it really reflects the spirituality of everything that is Rhode Island. Again, we blog. Joining us on the hotline, because we're going to get right down to it. This is possibly going to be the most cram-packed, action-packed, thrill-seeking coalition ride ever. Joining us on our hotline tonight is the newest member of the coalition family, Bella Robinson, Executive Director of Coyote. Call off your old tired ethics, the international organization advocating for the rights of sex workers everywhere. Bella, welcome to the coalition.
Thank you, David, for having me on tonight.
You've actually got Pat and...
That was Pat, and I'm Dave.
And to make things easier, there's another Dave here, too.
Right.
Exactly. Bella, we've got a very powerful, I'll call it part 1 of 2, blog piece up on the coalition under the blog headings. There's a separate section now for Bella Robinson. But we want to talk just for a couple minutes. We plan on having you in the studio in the next week or two to really spend an hour to really break the issue down. Belle, we had a tragedy in the past week or so, and it's really brought to a head the plight of sex workers here in the state of Rhode Island. Why don't you, first of all, just explain a little bit about Coyote, what happened here in Rhode Island, a murder took place, and what has been the typical knee-jerk legislative criminal justice response that really seems to be the epitome of all things Rhode Island.
This is how it starts. End the Demand campaign has been brought to Rhode Island. It's been ineffective, and it creates violence for sex workers everywhere it's been implemented. But they've decided all the women are victims and the men are the predators. This resulted in 22 men being arrested. In the same month, it also resulted in a 24-year-old escort, Ashley, who was murdered. The police response was to go over to West Warwick and arrest 3 spa workers. This really doesn't have much to do with human trafficking. This is a war on the sex workers, and the West Warwick police says they don't want them in their city. So we have our work to cut out for us.
Why does the state of Rhode Island, and many state governments in general, continue to push the notion that prohibition, eliminating basic functions of human behavior, is somehow going to end differently?
The hysteria around saving the virtue of white women. It goes back to the Mann Act of 1902. But, nowadays it's called modern-day trafficking, and they've reframed all sex work as trafficking. They've reframed all immigration now as trafficking and smuggling. And the media is publishing a lot of bad information that I hope we're going to get sorted out when we meet.
Right. Ultimately, we've got 2 issues here just on the surface. Number one, prohibition in the form of the recriminalization of prostitution here in Rhode Island has pushed the industry back into the dark shadows of Rhode Island life. And the results...
Exactly.
And while
I've been interviewing Rhode Island sex workers, within a few interviews, I found a woman that had been attacked a year ago, didn't report the attack. She had survivor's guilt because she thought maybe the guy was the same guy that killed Ashley. So until the women can report who's trying to rape, rob, and murder them, it's kind of hard to say you're trying to rescue them.
Right.
It's a form of violence against them.
Right. And if this sounds familiar, this is the same type of behavior being waged against people who are involved in we'll say, the addiction to drugs. Whereas
drugs, immigration, black skin.
You name an alternative lifestyle or an issue, that's how they react. The other issue, and we're going to dive in over the next few weeks, is the notion that the country is spending hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, on trafficking and interdiction, when in fact these are going to NGOs, non-governmental organizations, little accountability and no support whatsoever to the people that they are purporting to save. I mean, I think didn't they call them the Madonna Whore Complex at some point? I mean, it's madness.
They actually have the legal way they do it is trafficking NGOs are allowed to spend their money creating awareness. They're making hysteria, putting girls in cages in the media. If you go to GuideStar.org, you can look up the tax returns of these NGOs and see many of them are making six-figure salaries, being board members, but none of them have housing, jobs that pay a living wage, any services. You know, it's all about wanting to shame sex workers, tell you don't be a sex worker, go work at Walmart and starve.
Right.
And I see them as a criminal enterprise. They're misusing public funds. No services are coming out of them. So it's a really insane approach, and it's real bad for our whole community.
Well, and it's really kind of intellectually dishonest to tug at people's heartstrings about the tragedy and travesty of human trafficking when it comes to sex workers, underage people, and then on the flip side of that, not provide those support services, not have the treatment programs that are needed, not have housing, not have good paying jobs for the we're going to wrest you out of this awful environment, but then what do you have beyond that?
Absolutely nothing. And, everyone's jumping on board to make money off the movement. We had the A&E show 8 Minutes that actually went out, got girls to sign contracts in the back of a van without giving them a copy, lied to them, told them they were going to blur their faces, promised them housing, jobs, medical and dental, and then totally abandoned the woman, and one of them got arrested. They told her they would pray for her.
Well,
luckily, A&E did pull the show after a couple of episodes, and the only one that would help the woman that was in trouble that got arrested because of the show was the sex workers. We raised money to pay her rent, feed her children, and get her an immigration attorney. It's a big job.
Now, you drew a very powerful analogy, and I want folks to think of this. You pointed out that if someone is burned out of their home tragically, the American Red Cross, a variety of civic organizations and churches are there to help those people, provide them with shelter. If someone is, quote unquote, and we're using the big coalition air quotes here, rescued from trafficking, well, what's there to help those folks?
We ain't got nothing.
Nothing.
We ain't got nothing. Now, a lot of focus is going into the teens, which I totally agree. Teens don't belong in the sex industry. But when I went to the trafficking task force, I was amazed that the social workers and Houseboro people were up there talking about how they need to document, interview the teenagers to get a list of all the other teenagers they know, so they'll never be placed in a foster home or facility with one of those other girls that they might lure back into the life.
Right.
And I was thinking, we don't separate drug addicts when we put them in drug treatment, right?
Yeah. No.
This is insane.
No, it's just absolute madness. As I mentioned, we've only got a few minutes, but this has reached the type of emergency level that we've seen as a result of the sunsetting, if you will, of the Good Samaritan laws in the drug community, and at the same time, these Paleolithic attitudes by law enforcement, which are more, I think, again, it's all about statistics. It's all about crime statistics. We save people from ourselves, and as the story goes, I have seen the enemy, and he is us. So,
well, how are we going to get those armored Hummers if we don't keep our crime statistics up?
Absolutely, Bella. I know this was short. We're going to have you on again in the next week or two. Let's talk offline this weekend.
I look forward to it, and thank you so much. I look forward to coming back on the show many more times. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great night.
Bella Robinson, Executive Director of RI Coyote. You can see her first missive, if you will, on coalitionradio.us at the blog page under the self-titled Bella Robinson. Again, we're moving quick here. Another newer contributor to the show is in studio with us again. We always feel bad because we could spend an hour just talking with him. David Broussard. David, welcome back to the show.
Thanks very much, Pat.
All right.
And Dave.
All right.
Since you're both here.
You're welcome.
I wish my name was Sam.
I'm David, actually, not Dave.
Okay.
For purposes of
people
the show.
ask me, and I say, when you say David, it just makes you sound like my mother. So, David.
Let's talk again of architecture. Art and architecture. Again, David is published right on our blog with links to his website and your website, David.
It's called architecturehereandthere.com.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, almost daily analysis of different trends, both in architecture, but most importantly, how architecture affects our day-to-day life. Now, one of the big, and this was another chock-filled Rhode Island Newsweek, but one of the big issues confronting Rhode Islanders, particularly those from, as we call it here on the Coalition, Twin Riverton, all homage to Kate Nagel. In Twin Riverton, there seems to be a kerfuffle about another mega multi-big box development. Someone, by the way, just as an aside, pointed out from the audience, that why are we continuing to build big box malls when it is clear that retail traffic is sinking into oblivion? That's another side. But explain your take on that, and again, how these big box malls, these homages to consumer capitalism, how can they fit into our community, and how important is the design element in them?
Well, the design element is very, very important. Always has been, but it's only been a big issue for the last 50 or 60 years since tradition was overturned and modern architecture was enthroned as the almost mandatory design mindset of this nation and increasingly around the world.
Let me just jump in for a second. We started to touch on this when you were here a couple of weeks ago. Differentiate for the average person, the average guy like me. When you talk about modern architecture, give us some of the elements of that.
Okay, I'd like to thank your caller, by the way, for the second time in a row. I was on 2 weeks ago, and the people who were on before me were talking about GMOs,
Right.
And I write a lot about what I now call GMO architecture.
Okay.
And now I can write about erectile dysfunction architecture. But I think that the importance of the design element in the Tiverton situation is minimized by the extraordinarily humongous nature of the project, because the project is so massive that it doesn't belong in Tiverton however well it's designed. As I said on my blog, if Prince Charles loved the design, it still wouldn't be right for Tiverton.
Right.
However, Tivertonians have a right to argue that the taxes it would generate are worth the hit to the quality of life through the design the design of the project.
So this project has been proposed by the Carpianato Group, which, if folks aren't familiar with, they own strip malls all over Rhode Island, Massachusetts. Probably most famously in Rhode Island, the Chapel View development. That's the former Cuckoo House
Training school.
the former training school. Pardon me for using the non-PC term for that. And you have, in your blog, you said that Carpianato's designs run from excellent to execrable, which we love that word here at the Coalition. So, in the view of something like the Chapel View, where would you see the design flaws are in that particular development?
Well, Chapel View is beautiful if you separate out the former training school aspects and its remaining structures that were preserved from the infill, the buildings that were built to connect the training school architecture and create a project with enough square footage to be worth the Carpianato while. That stuff generally is pretty bad. There is, even among that category of architecture at that project, there's reasonably good, but mostly it's pretty bad. And what is it surrounded by? It's surrounded by asphalt, acres and acres